I am Russell. The following contract removal documents were written by our Akashic Galactic historian, Andrew Bartas, and slightly modified by my I Am presence. I call to all beings of earth mind sentience. Hear me as I speak my heart's truth. Hear me as I speak these words. I now revoke all soul family immigration status for the 15 multidimensional beings who inserted themselves in our grid without express consented permission with all my past, present, and future selves and lives. I now revoke all soul family relations to the 15 tangible and intangible primary beings who have hijacked our incarnation process. I now revoke all immigration status in the astral world to any of the pieces and or parts of the 15 primary beings who intend to become soul family through deception or the use of fine print in soul contracts. I now state with all the power from my heart, I do not consent with any interaction, covert or overt. I do not consent to any interaction with any parts of the broken system of incarnation. I now banish all forms of the 15 primary control beings from the entireness of my soul family until such time as the 15 primary beings and all pieces and parts come to the fundamental understanding and acceptance of equality for all sentient and non-sentient kind. I call forth all spiritual contracts that involve limiting the unified aspects of our global dream time society. I revoke all implied consent, unknown past life consent, unknown cultural consent, and all situations that limit me as being with a complete soul family with all the capability of living within the unified global dream time as a sovereign earth-centric soul with infinitely complete soul family circuitry. I hereby revoke all soul family decision-making processes from false spiritual courts and hijacked incarnation grid employees in tangible and spirit form. I now revoke all captured or assumed powers by all beings in the entire system of domination and control. I now revoke all interaction or assumed power with all energy harvesting beings. I demand instant remedy and repayment of all stolen energy for lifetimes past, present, and future. I do not give consent in any way, shape, or form to be part of the system of domination and control. I invoke the power of my soul family spiritual court of equity to act as a medium of contractual interaction with any being in the system of domination and control. I call to all spiritual contracts that exist within my past, present, future beings and cells that exist in this dimension and time stream. At this exact moment, in the ever-present co-creating moment, I summons all DNA lineage ancestors to create a unified and proper spiritual court of equity, so I may find remedy and resolve with all contracts that have inserted fine print during the pre-birth and birth process. I call forth all soul ancestors to begin reading the record of recording in the sacred neutral point of view. All dogmas, political, spiritual, and religious, are hereby permanently expelled from this neutral reading of all spiritual contracts with all timelines visible and invisible. All dimensions interacting passively or actively are hereby informed that time does not exist as a social agreement. the counting of time returns to the natural universal format. At this ever-present co-creative and pro-creative moment, I hereby inform all entities that have territorial issues in spirit or solid form, the rulers of this spiritual court of equity prohibit all territorial assertions of knowledge, wisdom, or enlightenment that exclude all sides from witnessing the readings of the record in the sacred neutral point of view. Contract removal for media systems. I call to all spiritual contracts that exist within my past, present, and future beings, selves that exist in this dimension and time stream, and all time streams above and below the earth-centric sine wave of coexistence. At this time, at this exact moment, in the ever-present co-creative moment, I summons all DNA, lineage, ancestors to create a unified proper spiritual court of equity, so I may find remedy to resolve with all contracts that have inserted fine print during the pre-birth and birth process. I call forth the proper spiritual court of equity to hear my decree of contract removal. I revoke all spiritual contracts with earth-based media systems using domination and control as means of energy harvesting, fear instigation, or reality manipulation with energy propaganda techniques. I call forth all ancestors of all soul relations to hold space in this spiritual court of equity. I call to Earth Mother and all her light denseness within all inner and outer space to come forward and occupy this spiritual court of equity. O great mystery, who is the source of all power, I call to you. Come with your sacred neutral synchronicity so all beings may hold space within unity consciousness. I hereby revoke all spiritual contracts with all media personalities that do not have full use of free will and full knowledge of our DNA ancestry. I hereby revoke all spiritual contracts with all media agencies, corporations, and media-based family crests. I hereby revoke all spiritual contracts, assumptions, presumptions, and statistical models that predict my habit patterns through the use of commercial advertising, intertwining with the system of domination and control. I do not consent to etheric grid broadcasting over public airways, television, internet, radio, or any other means or methods of that propagate propaganda for mass consumption. I do not consent to predictive modeling by etheric or commercial means. I hereby revoke all spiritual contracts with all media-based sacred geometry buildings. I hereby revoke all spiritual contracts with the sacred geometry media presidents, shareholders, news anchors, news reporters, pundits, talking heads, and all representatives of government officials within the entire global media network. You have no power over me with your presumptions of knowledge. We are manifesting, co-creating spirits. I hereby revoke all spiritual contracts with all news regurgitating systems, crawlers, websites, search engines, print media, and all forms of etheric propaganda used within all these systems. I revoke all presumptions of consent with all media agencies. I revoke all assumptions with all advertising agencies that are funded by the system of domination and control. I do not consent with any advertising systems targeting soul groups, soul migration, or the spiritual incarnation process. I hereby revoke all spiritual contracts that limit the genetic, free-willed expression of all sentient kind. I revoke all spiritual contracts that define the media as our teller of oral tradition or generational teachers. I revoke all contracts with the sacred geometry satellite broadcasting system. I revoke all contracts with etheric artificial intelligences that use sacred geometry satellite systems as a means to hijack my information stream. I do not consent to any psychic monitoring or influencing from any media system that services the system of domination and control. I hereby demand the instant removal of all broadcast-based psychic parasites and their propaganda and harvesting systems that create herds of psychic parasites. I revoke all contracts that use my life force as a false form of consent for the propaganda and spreading of psychic parasites with all my DNA soul relations. I hereby revoke all soul contracts that grant the media power to last beyond one generation of history. I demand all rights of generational knowledge be returned to the soul family structure. I demand the return of all history in the complete and transparent manner, so there will never be any more secrets from our people. I hereby revoke all rights, duties, responsibilities, and current actions of all media personalities. Your services are no longer required. I revoke all privileges that grant the media families any power over my soul contracts, soul family, or soul-based migration patterns. I revoke all rights to any media system based in domination and control from ever returning within my soul family structure of all past, present, and future lives. I hereby demand the instant cessation of removal of all false information from all media. I hereby demand that any and all future distribution of information over all forms of media absolutely embody truth, integrity, and transparency, impunity. I hereby declare that Earth Mother is now in dominion with me and all local or mass media information exchange systems. I call forth all the ancestors to honor this reading of my free will and enter it into the Earth Akashic record for all sentient and non-sentient kind to understand our freedom comes with our use of sacred, neutral, free will at all times. Revocation of all banking systems. I call to all spiritual contracts that exist within my past, present, and future beings and selves that exist in this dimension and time stream, including all time streams above and below the Earth-centric sine wave of coexistence. At this exact moment, in the ever-present co-creating moment, I summons all DNA lineage ancestors to create a unified, proper spiritual court of equity, so I may find remedy and resolve with all contracts that have inserted fine print during the pre-birth and birth process. I call for the four elements: air, earth, water, and fire. I call forth the spiritual court of equity with all ancestors in union with the migration pattern of all soul family incarnating on Earth Mother. I call the primary ancestor spirits of Earth Mother to come into this spiritual court of equity to hold space for the reading and removal of all contracts dealing with the energetic exchange of value systems. I call forth the Earth Global Dreamtime. I call to the unified Dreamtime societies of all Earth to come to this spiritual court of equity to provide their complete wisdom to this sacred moment in which I reclaim my sovereign free will, spirit authority for all exchange of energy for value systems. I hereby revoke all spiritual contracts with the primary banking families. I revoke all spiritual contracts with all banking family crests. I revoke, remove, and dissolve all banking family trusts that use my name as a number for energy harvesting. I revoke all assumed rights used by the DNA-based kingship, lordship, or manor role contracts that function within all banking families. I hereby state I do not consent to rule by the few. I do not consent to rule by banking families. I do not consent with the assumed authorities of the banking families funding the free court system. I revoke all rights, privileges, and rules created by the family crest based or DNA lineage based family banking families to dominate and control the free court system. I hereby revoke all spiritual contracts that define the banking system as being intertwined with my free will. I revoke all fine print within all my soul contracts, past, present, and future, that deal with any banking systems as a 3D matrix debt collection or energy harvesting system. I demand the instant repayment of all energy and 3D matrix representations of value. I do not consent to the use of corrupt courts as a means of judgment. I revoke all rights of 3D-based courts' assumptions of power in any 3D exchange for value systems created for the follies of the banking families. I hereby revoke all consent of ink-based, web-based, or energy-based signature harvesting systems. I revoke all rights to use my 3D matrix signature to represent me in any court system, spiritual, or 3D matrix. I do not consent to the use of my soul contracts as a means of energy harvesting from any of the primary banking systems created by the primary soul contract holding banking families. I revoke all rights to use my name in any form of banking family coat of arms contracts. I demand the instant and permanent eraser of all signatures used to represent me in the banking exchange for values system. I do not consent to the use of my life force for any exchange for value banking systems that is not completely transparent with all transactions, spiritual or 3D matrix. I hereby state that all banking-based buildings using sacred geometry have no power over my sovereign free will. I hereby revoke all spiritual contracts with all banking systems that have sacred geometry, that use sacred geometry as a means of energy harvesting or a tool for domination and control. I revoke all rights, privileges, and assumptions with all buildings that use sacred geometry as fine print soul contract enforcement systems. I do not consent to any sacred geometry buildings to house, hold, or transfer any of my life force to any banking system on all of Earth Earth's timelines or coexisting dimensions. I hereby revoke all spiritual contracts with all sacred geometry systems that use my life force without direct consent from me and all my soul family ancestors in complete agreement. I revoke all rights, assumptions, and rules that create a new sacred geometry banking system. I hereby declare that all banking families and systems are now banished from operating in secret, covert, or overt ways to harvest my energy in any way, shape, or form. I hereby declare that Earth Mother is now in dominion along with me for all energy exchange for value systems. I call forth all the ancestors to honor this reading of my free will and enter it into the Earth Akashic Records for all sentient and non-sentient kind to understand our freedom comes with the use of sovereign free will at all times. Revocation of government. I call to all spiritual contracts that exist within my past, present, and future beings and selves that exist in this dimension and time stream, along with all time streams above and below the Earth-centric sine wave of coexistence. At this exact moment, in the ever-present co-creating moment, I summons all DNA lineage ancestors to create a unified proper spiritual court of equity, so I may find remedy and resolve with all contracts that have inserted fine print during the pre-birth and birth process. I hereby revoke all spiritual contracts that deal with all government personalities, elected and unelected. I revoke all spiritual contracts with all family crest-based government systems. I revoke all rights, duties, and responsibilities to all government entities that use my vote as a means of energy harvesting. I revoke all spiritual contracts with every senator, congressman, ambassador, Supreme Court members, president, vice presidents, and all cabinet members. I revoke all spiritual contracts with every branch of government for all of my past, present, and future lives. I do not consent to the rule of the privileged few. I revoke all rights, responsibilities, assumptions, pre-assumptions, and signatures that retain me within the entirety of any or all governmental organizations, family, crest, sacred geometry buildings, monuments, memorials, or military bases. I hereby revoke all spiritual contracts with a corporate-run government. I do not consent to any form of corporate government that harvests energy from its people. I hereby revoke all spiritual contracts. You motherfuckers. I hereby revoke, you cocksuckers. I hereby revoke all spiritual contracts with the Federal Reserve families. I revoke all rights, assumptions, and responsibilities with every member of the Federal Reserve and exchange for value systems run by any government or corporate officials. I revoke all spiritual contracts hidden within our government and exchange for value systems. I revoke all spiritual contracts with all governmental offices that use sacred geometry crests to retain power or fine print into soul contracts. I revoke all rights, privileges, powers, assumed and unassumed, consented and unconsented, with every federal law enforcement branch that uses Federal Reserve energy support the system of domination control. I revoke all spiritual contracts that create consent for the government committees that determine quality of life. I revoke all rights, duties, responsibilities for all governmental systems that write laws that affect my spiritual contracts with my direct consent, without my direct consent, from my total DNA lineage, ancestors past, present, and future. I revoke all spiritual contracts that enable the government to use time travel as a means of domination and control. I revoke all rights and duties to all time travel personalities, operations, systems, past, present, and future. I demand the immediate return of all government time travel personalities to their right and perfect timeline. I revoke all rights with all technologies that alter dimensions, manipulate time streams, or do harm to any sentient life forms coexisting on Earth in all timelines and dimensions. I do not consent to timeline wars. I do not consent to mass propaganda. I do not consent with war-based industrial complexes. I do not consent to the use of military as a means of domination and control. I hereby revoke all spiritual contracts secretly interwoven into each and every law, past, present, and future. I do not consent to the passing of laws that affect soul family migration, soul family immigration, or systems that prevent me from uniting completely and totally with my soul family. I demand the instant return of all soul family that have been denied the right to coexist with me for all my past, present, and future lives. I revoke all rights, rules, and laws that define soul family on a 3D matrix level. I return all definitions of soul family status to Earth Mother. I revoke all rights to label soul families with sacred geometry linguistics that cross dimensions or reality. I revoke all spiritual contracts with all forms of sacred geometry linguistics, past, present, or future. I do not consent to the use of sacred geometry linguistics as a means of energy harvesting. I do not consent to the use of sacred geometry cities, infrastructures, linguistics, or artwork for the purpose of domination and control. I hereby revoke all spiritual contracts that enable the government to dominate and control all people on any timeline or dimension in Earth Mother's realms. I revoke all assumptions and pre-assumptions of power and caste systems. I revoke all spiritual contracts that define sentient life as cattle or commerce. I do not consent to any life force being used for any purpose that does not heal Mother Earth and promote unity consciousness among all sentient kind living and coexisting with Earth Mother. I hereby declare that Earth Mother is now in dominion along with myself for all forms of global government, interpersonal relations, or galactic relations for all sentient kind existing and coexisting on Earth Mother's realms. I call forth all the ancestors to honor this reading of my sovereign free will and enter it into the Earth Akashic record for all sentient kind to understand our freedom comes with the use of our sovereign free will at all times.